Good evening. It was a little before midnight on the 5th of September 2014. I'm not one to track dates, but this one was special because it was the night before we first opened the doors of the Nutcracker at Kala Ghoda. I stepped into the street outside for a silent moment, and as I looked up at the name board, I should have been excited because a dream that I'd had forever to open a restaurant was finally coming true. But all I could feel were bouts of anxiety as one question played in my mind again and again and again. What if I fail? I've spent 15 of 27 years of my working life doing things that were not truly meant for me. I stand here today, a case study of sorts for us to understand that exploration is not failure. Change is a powerful tool. It builds us. It brings us closer to our purpose. It allows us to reinvent ourselves. And here's a little bit about my story. Growing up, I was interested in going to culinary school and being a chef, but by the time I graduated and I was sort of planning my next steps, I decided to change paths. Finance seemed a little more familiar, tried, tested, and so I signed up for my chartered accountancy. I entered the corporate world, lived that typical corporate life, late nights, deadlines, crazy pressure, loads of coffee, and I loved the thrill of it initially. But as time passed, I began to feel a sense of restlessness. I would be in meeting rooms where people excitedly debated accounting standards and financial disclosures, and even after being there for 7 years, I sometimes felt like the imposter in that room. I felt disconnected, I felt disengaged. I just didn't fit in. And I knew that the time to move on had come. Many of us reach this point in our careers, but we choose status quo. We think that quitting is failure. And sometimes we've just invested so much of our time, so much of our energy in a career that it's become our identity. We say, I'm an architect, I'm a lawyer, I'm a banker, and if I'm not that anymore, then who would I be? And the thought of reinventing ourselves is intimidating. But status quo can be a silent killer. You will never be the best version of yourself if you're in a place that you don't fit into. And so I urge each of you, if you are ever met with this restlessness, you owe it to yourselves to listen. I had my second shot at following my dream, but life had other plans for me. I met with a nasty car accident, and I was homebound for 3 months, thinking about my what if again. At this time, a dear friend of mine that ran a very good business in the fashion industry, she proposed that we work together. I knew nothing about the space, but we said, let's give it a shot. I didn't deep dive, I didn't think it out too much. It sounded challenging, it sounded exciting, and I jumped in. I spent 7 years in a space that was completely different. I was surrounded by international fashion, loads of creativity, innovation, Indian craftsmanship. And honestly, I felt a little more aligned to this than finance. But as the years passed, I began to feel this restlessness again. By then, I was about 34 years old. I'd been doing this for 7 years again. And I knew that if I didn't follow my urge to open a restaurant now, it may never happen for me. And so, for the second time around, 15 years down in my career, I decided to change course. My husband Sid, he shares my passion for food, and he was equally excited about the idea. He's much more of a bold and an instinctive decision maker. And so while I was still making my list of pros and cons, he had lined up brokers, lined up locations, and the intent was set. Now we just had this mountain before us to climb. Making the financial plans and the budgets, that was all the easy part. But what was important was for me to really take a deep dive into the industry. It was a space I didn't know anything about, and I was sure I was not going in blind. So what followed were months of self-learning, classes, conferences, workshops, talking to people from the industry, spending hours in restaurants trying to see what people were doing and how we could be different. At this time, there was one question, one important question that we had to ask ourselves. And I think that it's an important question for anyone starting their journey in their own business to ask, how would this brand be a reflection of us? How would it truly reflect us, our personality? I was very sure that I didn't want to mimic or copy somebody else's success story. It had to feel authentic to me. And for this, I had to go way back in time and understand where my love and my connection with food started. I remember waking up on Sunday mornings to the smell of French toast and sully eggs sizzling in the pan as my mom cooked. I remember cookouts with my friend. I remember spending hours in the kitchen watching my grandmom cook. I also had to understand how my connection with food had evolved as I grew. The reasons that I had decided to convert to vegetarianism, everything that inspired me on our travels. It was always the fresh produce at markets, the home-style cafes, generosity of portion sizes, warmth, honesty. And as I went down this journey in my head, bit by bit, piece by piece, the concept of what we wanted to do came together. We always loved going for breakfast. On any of our holidays, we would always be looking at the breakfast cafes to go to. And we said, why not serve breakfast all day long? And while I had converted into vegetarianism, you can never really take away a Parsi from their Edu. And so I decided that eggs must take prime space on our menu. And so we decided that the Nutcracker would be an all-day breakfast eggetarian cafe. The concept didn't really exist in the city, and we got some really strange looks when we shared our ideas with people, but we said, we're going to just keep our blinders on, we're going to just keep focused and keep going. And so after a year of building, planning, trialing, we reached opening day. And it was a day I will never forget. I was petrified that we'd go empty, nobody would come, but thankfully an hour in, we had a steady flow of customers, and that kept going. But we were not prepared enough. And by 3 p.m., we were completely sold out on food. We had to meekly tell customers, sorry, we can only reopen at 7 for dinner service. We're re-prepping, and till then, just coffee and dessert. At that time, Sid and I had spent the last 8 or 9 hours on our feet, not eaten a morsel of food. Both of us were exhausted. And we had a couple of friends that came in for lunch, and they were still at their table. We had messed up on their order and somehow sort of double delivered them a burger. So there was one black bean burger lying on the table. And Sid, who isn't very used to skipping meals, decided that he was exhausted and he really needed to take a couple of bites of that burger. Before we knew, we had landed ourselves our first Zomato review, 1 star. It spoke about how customers were refused food while the owners insolently were munching into burgers and other savories at the table right behind them. I was mortified. I don't know what hit worse, getting a 1-star review or being branded insolent. But I learned my first and possibly the most important lesson of hospitality that day. Customer perception is everything. A customer may forget what they ate, but they're never going to forget how you make them feel. Never. And I think that's possibly true of any space that we choose to work in. I was so scarred by the incident, it took me the best of 4 or 5 years to actually sit on my table at my restaurant and be able to enjoy a meal. I just couldn't do that. Sid, of course, continued to munch burgers at every opportunity he got. Well, the beginning few months were hard. It was a state of chaos. We were underskilled. We were just so short on people. We were overwhelmed constantly. The beginning up of any startup venture is going to be hard. A good idea is just the starting point, really, but you don't have a job profile that's going to tell you what to do. You don't have a boss that you can go and escalate your problems to and hope that he'll find a solution. Everything is yours to do. Every problem is yours to solve. You have to be all in. It takes grit and it takes resilience, and you have to show up time after time after time, especially when things get hard. The work life and personal life scale tilts absolutely one way, and you have to expect it may be that way for a long time. I was working 7 days a week. So it was double hatting between his business and this one. We had a 4-year-old and we were constantly juggling schedules. She would often choose play dates and her playground time. She would skip that and she would choose to come to the restaurant just so she could be around me. And she would just wait. She would sit on those 3 yellow chairs outside, legs swinging, waiting for mom to finish and come back home. Mom guilt was so real, and all I could hope for is that she wasn't seeing me fail in my mom duties, but she was seeing me build something that I really, really believed in. But in the middle of all this, something else was happening, something truly magical. I felt this connection with work, with what I was doing, that I had never felt before. It was like efforts came effortlessly. I felt a sense of flow. I felt a sense of purpose, possibly what the Japanese call their ikigai. And after weeks and months and years of seeking, I had found that place that I fit into. And for me, this was my life's biggest Eureka moment. As time passed and we moved from our journey of 1 restaurant to 8, the road was, of course, spotted with challenges, like it is in any business. And I was constantly second-guessing myself. Self-doubt was this frequent visitor. I felt inadequate because I wasn't a trained chef. I didn't have the experience that other restaurateurs had. And magically, what kept me going was because the one thing that I knew is that I knew that I loved most the joy that food brought to customers. And each time a customer came up and shared their warmth and their kindness, and especially those little kids with their gleeful little smile saying, "Thank you, Pancake Auntie. I don't know how I got that name, but I did." I knew that I had to be doing something right. I knew I had to just follow my gut and I had to just keep going. I strongly believe in a culture that's built on kindness, and not just in the way that we chose to, treat our guests, but also in the way we chose to work together as a team. It was important for me that the teams learn to respect each other, irrespective of the pay grades. It was important that they understood our brand philosophy and then they understood the non-negotiables. And as time passed and as the teams grew and as we built, it was not so lonely anymore because this isn't my journey anymore. It really is ours. I'm reminded of a speech that I once saw online, something that late Steve Jobs gave to a bunch of graduates at Stanford. He introduced this concept of connecting the dots, and I'm sure possibly many of you have heard it. He spoke about how different experiences in his life that seemed really unrelated, when he looked back, he saw how they connected and they formed a meaningful path that brought him to where he is. He said you could only join the dots when you looked backward. Fashion and finance are really unrelated to what I do today, but I can see now how they built me, how they set me up for everything that was coming my way. Converting to vegetarianism, for no real reason, was the beginning of my journey of invention. Finding a life partner that constantly pushed me to go outside my comfort zone, to believe I could be an entrepreneur. And then, of course, that 1-star review, which seemed like it was the worst possible thing that could have happened that day, was my guiding star on how I wanted customers to feel when they walk into the Nutcracker. What humbles me most is when I think about how far a dream can go if you just choose to begin. For all of the kids that are out there, some of you know what you want to do, some of you don't. And that's completely all right. You don't have to make definitive decisions about your life now. But what you have to do, what I would encourage you to do, is go out there and take every opportunity to explore what you love doing, what you connect with, and just hope that somewhere, when you look backward, the dots are going to connect for you. Life is going to throw you a curveball every now and then, but those are opportunities to reinvent yourself. Self-doubt, that one's going to be inevitable. But you have to learn to make it your ally, because every time it's shouting at you, what if I fail? It's actually shouting at you, or maybe this time it's whispering, for you to find that version of yourself to dig deeper and find a version of yourself that you probably don't even know exists. Choose to be kind and choose to be authentic. Stay true to yourself. And in this journey of self-exploration, you will find your own flow. You will find your purpose. You will find that joyful moment in life that's your very own Eureka. Thank you.